Welcome back to another edition of American Football News. This week, Week 10 in the NCAA. American Football News is proud to announce that we will now be featuring 2 exclusive shows, one for college football, one for professional football. Please be sure to check out both new shows on Spreaker.com, YouTube.com, or be sure to check us out on our other media platforms, SoundCloud, Twitter at News American, and Tumblr. Look for American Football News. Okay, a rundown of the top 25 teams for this particular week, and our college football selection numbers, the top 4 teams if the playoffs were to start tomorrow. Our number 1 team in the country, still the same as from the very beginning of the year. The University of Alabama takes the number 1 spot overall, followed closely by the University of Clemson, number 3, Louisiana State University, and to round out the top 4 and the top 4 playoff teams, the University of Notre Dame. On the outside looking in, number 5, Michigan, and number 6, Georgia, look to take any spots made available by any of the top 4 teams following any losses this upcoming week. Coming in at number 7, the University of Oklahoma. Number 8, the Washington State Cougars climb into the top 25 and the top 10. Coming in at number 9, one of our biggest surprises of the year, the University of Kentucky. That's right, the University of Kentucky football team is in the top 25 and is in the top 10. Definitely a team to keep your eye on. Rounding out the top 10 is Ohio State University, looking to rebound after their horrific loss to Purdue a couple weeks ago. Coming in at number 11, the University of Florida. Number 12, Central Florida University. 13, West Virginia. 14, Penn State. 15, the Utah Utes. 16, the Iowa Hawkeyes. 17, the University of Texas. 18, Mississippi State. Number 19, yet another surprise on this list. The Syracuse Orange. That's right, the Syracuse Orange have been playing very, very well this year, have beaten teams that they shouldn't have stayed with teams that they shouldn't have, and are now being rewarded for their hard work. Number 20, Texas A&M. 21, North Carolina State University. Number 22, Boston College, crawling their way back into the top 25. Number 23, a new team this week, the Fresno State Bulldogs, sitting at 7-1, finally cracked the top 25 for the first time in the 2018 season. Number 24, a surprising team, but this team is not somebody you want to take lightly or sleep on. Number 24, the Iowa State Cyclones. Despite their 4-3 record, this team deserves to be in the top 25. Beating opponents that are much better than they are or ranked, the Cyclones have earned the right to be into the top 25. Congratulations. And to round out our top 25 teams for this particular week, the Virginia Cavaliers, sitting at 6-2 on the season, finally work their way into that conversation. All right, we will now take a break and go to our Heisman Trophy candidate watch. The top 4 candidates are the ones that we will pay closer attention to every single week. And we have a new candidate this particular week. Our number 1 candidate still is the quarterback from the University of Alabama. Despite the fact that Alabama had the week off, his numbers are quite impressive for the 2018 season. However, a big test this upcoming week as he takes on the Louisiana State Tigers at Tiger Stadium. This is Alabama's very first tough road test of the year and their toughest opponent on their schedule to date. The quarterback's numbers on the year are fairly good. 2,066 yards passing, 25 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That is the biggest reason why he's number 1. He also adds 123 yards rushing with 2 touchdowns to complement his Heisman Trophy candidate year. Our number 2 Heisman Trophy candidate is Kyler Murray, quarterback Oklahoma, completing 17 of 22 passes this past weekend. He also threw for 2 touchdowns and ran for another. By the end of the game, he had thrown for 352 yards, 3 touchdowns, had run for 46 yards, and had run for 1 touchdown, all against the Kansas State Wildcats. His 2018 numbers are impressive. In fact, a little bit better than the number 1 candidate. 2,329 yards passing, 28 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He also complements that with a very impressive 474 yards rushing and 6 touchdowns rushing. It is my prediction that Kyler Murray, provided his team stays healthy and continues to win, will end up beating out this Alabama quarterback for that coveted Heisman Trophy winner. Our number 3 candidate is Dwayne Haskins, quarterback, Ohio State. 2 weeks ago, Haskins threw for over 400 yards at Purdue. However, that was about it. Ohio State couldn't get anything else done, and Purdue's speed really played into that game as they were able to pull off the upset against the Buckeyes 2 weeks ago. The Buckeyes have a much easier task at hand this week, playing the University of Nebraska, who has underperformed and been a disappointment, to say the least, in their Big Ten candidacy this year. Dwayne Haskins' numbers for 2018 are quite impressive. 2,801 yards passing, 30 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. He only has 56 yards on the ground and 1 touchdown to complement it, but the 2,801 yards passing is enough to get anybody's attention. Our number 4 Heisman Trophy candidate for this week is a new one. Gardner Minshew, quarterback, Washington State. The Cougars are playing very, very, very well, and they're the only team in the Pac-12 with fewer than 2 conference losses. They have jumped back into the top 25, have reemerged in the top 10, and it's good to see them coming back into the national conversation. My thoughts go back to that 97 year where they ended up winning the Pac-10 at that point in time to play the University of Michigan in the Rose Bowl, only to fall slightly short. Don't mention anything about Ryan Leaf. That's a person most people in Washington State want to forget. Minshew's numbers on the year are quite impressive. In fact, better than any of the candidates above him. 3,183 yards passing, 26 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He also adds 48 yards rushing with 2 rushing touchdowns to pad his 2018 total. He had a big week last week against Stanford, throwing for 438 yards and 3 touchdowns. And again, it is my opinion that this Gardner Minshew guy is not somebody to be taken lightly, and that his candidacy may rise as the season goes on. All right, we take a look back at a few scores from last week. We had 4 games in particular that we were keeping an eye on, and we will go over the results of those with you at this time. One of our teams or games to keep an eye on last week was a little bit of a surpriser. The Appalachian State Mountaineers last week climbed into the top 25 and were slated to take on the Georgia Southern Eagles, who were just as good, if not a little bit better, than the Appalachian State Mountaineers. And the game itself was a little disappointing. Only one team came to play, and the Mountaineers weren't that team. Georgia Southern ends up winning by 20, 34-14. All right, another one of our games that we kept an eye on last week was a Big Ten matchup. The University of Iowa took on Penn State University last Saturday, the 27th, and you were able to catch that game on ESPN. Typical of a Big Ten matchup, these two teams slugged it out both on the ground and in the air a little bit. At the end of the day, however, the Nittany Lions were the ones to walk away victorious. In a close matchup, they beat the Hawkeyes 30-24. Our third game that we kept an eye on this past week was a SEC matchup that featured the Florida Gators taking on the Georgia Bulldogs. This was a little bit of a surpriser of a game, as the Bulldogs really came to play and the Gators kind of underperformed. The Bulldogs came out on top, 36-17. And our fourth game that we kept an eye on last week was a Pac-12 matchup. And we just got done singing the praises of the quarterback for Washington State. That was, in fact, the game that we were keeping an eye on ourselves. The Washington State Cougars took on the Stanford Cardinal last weekend in a game that has implications on who's going to go to the Pac-12 championship game in December. And that answer was given with it being a resounding Washington State. Washington State was able to hand it to Stanford and hold their own, and at the end of the day came out victorious, 41-38. All right, we are at the portion of the show where we take a look ahead to this weekend's slate of games. We have quite a few games to keep an eye on. One in particular that's going to be watched across the nation and is going to have huge implications as to what goes on in November and parts of December with the championship games coming up. Our number one game to keep an eye on this next weekend will feature two SEC teams. The number 6 Georgia Bulldogs will take on the number 9 Kentucky Wildcats. This is something that would be quite intriguing if you're a college basketball fan. Georgia, every once in a while, able to throw together a semi-decent basketball squad. Kentucky, usually one of those top 4 teams in the country. However, we're not talking about college basketball at this point in time. We're talking about college football. And the Wildcats are looking to upset the Bulldogs and continue their march towards an SEC championship game. You can catch this game Saturday, November 3rd at 3:30 and will be broadcast on CBS. It is our prediction that the Georgia Bulldogs will humble the Wildcats and will bring an end to their Cinderella season. Our number 2 game of the week to keep your eye on is a Pac-12 matchup. The number 13 West Virginia Mountaineers will take on the number 17 Texas Longhorns. You can catch this game at 3:30 on Saturday, November 3rd. And this game will be broadcast on Fox and will be coming to you live from Royal Texas Memorial Stadium. Texas is a bit up and down this year. West Virginia a bit better in that area. The Mountaineers, however, a little bit newer to the big scene. This is going to be a close game. I think the Texas Longhorns will come out on top. All right, our third game to keep an eye on will feature 2 more ranked opponents and should be a decent game. This time we travel to the Big Ten and we take a look at a big matchup for the University of Michigan, a much tougher test than Wisconsin or the Spartans of Michigan State. This time, Michigan is going to have to fend off the Nittany Lions of Penn State. However, they do have a few things going for them. The game takes place in Ann Arbor and will happen at Michigan Stadium. This game is scheduled for kickoff at 3:45 p.m. Saturday, November 3rd, and can be caught on ESPN. However, it is our prediction that the Nittany Lions will walk into the big house and will humble the Wolverines and hand them their second loss of the season, their first Big Ten loss of the year. Our final game to keep an eye on is, of course, the game of the week and will garner a lot of national attention. The number 1 Alabama Crimson Tide will travel to Tiger Stadium to take on the Louisiana State Tigers Saturday, November 3rd. That is an 8 p.m. scheduled kickoff, and this game can be caught on CBS. This is really going to determine who in the SEC West Division will go to that SEC championship game later on this year. All right, we are running out of time. Be sure to check out our NFL exclusive radio show, and we thank you for taking the time to listen to our college football show.